People often talk about ColdFusion as being a rapid application development platform, and it completely is. But one of the things that I've been loving about it, especially recently, is its ability to provide a rapid prototyping platform, meaning I can use all of the native CFML constructs to quickly put together a prototype. And I'll demonstrate the way I've been doing it. So right now I have just a single page prototype that has screen simulations. I have users, and I can click through into users, and I see my user detail, and I can click through to a website detail, and this is the project that the person's working on. I can go back to the user, I can go back up to the users. Now, if you notice what's going on in the URL, I'm using fragments, and actually when I click into a detail, it's just going to the user fragment. And when I click into a project, it's just going to the user project fragment. In fact, this whole page is just one giant page that has all of these individual pages laid out in succession. And you don't have to do it this way. This is just how I'm using it to decrease the friction in creating cross-page functionality and being able to use Sublime's multi-cursor selections to change features of a page across multiple pages at one time. It's always a trade-off, ease of use versus focus of files, etc. So let me just show you what's going on. So the page will look something like this. I have a single page, I have a CF script block at the top, I have a style block after that, I have my page simulations. Here I'm illustrating that you could use CF include. In this case, I just have them, in the case of the demo I'm showing you, I just have them one after another within the same file. I then have my JavaScript block to do DOM querying and set up event bindings, etc. And then at the bottom, I have a bunch of helper functions that help put the prototype together. And I'll show you a more fleshed out example in a second. But what I wanted to illustrate here is that there's nothing fancy going on. There's no magic. This is all the native functionality of ColdFusion. I can seamlessly mix my script blocks with my tag blocks. I can seamlessly integrate CFML control flow tag-based syntax into my HTML rendering. I have my JavaScript mixed in with everything else. And then, of course, because ColdFusion allows for function hoisting, these function declarations at the bottom become available to the entire template, which just gives me a real nice top-down readability. So let's look at a more fleshed out example of what we just saw in the browser. So let's just fold all of these. And you can see I have my script block at the top, I have my styles, I have my CF output, I have my JavaScript. I don't actually have any JavaScript in this particular demo. And then I have a couple of helper functions. And again, this is just to show that these functions can be hoisted to the top. So my script block, this just sets up the sample data for the prototype itself. I have my list of users. And then when I click into a particular user, I'm just going to grab the first user off of this collection here. I'm going to use that as the detail user. For that, I'm going to flesh out some of the sub-user properties. In this case, we have a projects collection. And then when I click into the project detail, I'm going to use the sample user, grab their projects, and I'm going to use the first project as the project detail page. So again, prototyping is all about trade-offs of fidelity and functionality and ease of creation. There are obviously trade-offs that I'm making here in that the user and the project are static as you click through, regardless of which one you click in the list. So there's our scripts. Styles, what we'll see here is that I have a page, and the page has a min height of 100 vertical height units and a margin bottom of 100 vertical height units. And that's an attempt for me to create a illusion that these pages live independently. If we jump back into the browser, you can see that the user here has basically two whole page heights until it gets to the next view. And that's just so that if the person's scrolling around, we can keep that suspension of disbelief intact for a little bit longer, right? We can still scroll up and down, but the jumping to the pages and then being able to scroll a little bit past the page without seeing additional content, I think helps to create that illusion. And then we have some additional styles used for the rest of the page, in the case breadcrumbs and how they render. All right, so that's my style block. Let's come back to the output block in a second. Again, I have no script here, but you can see things like the breadcrumbs. All I'm doing is setting the output equal to true for my breadcrumb functions. And that's one of the beautiful things about ColdFusion. Most of the time in ColdFusion, we treat our functions as things that return data, but functions can also output data directly to the current page buffer. So in this case, I'm treating this function not so much as a control flow logic, but as an actual reusable chunk of rendered data. Here you can see I'm passing in the links of breadcrumbs to render, and then I'm actually outputting the HTML directly within the function body, and that will be interpolated into the point in the template where it's being used. And then I have other helper functions here, like a shorthand for encoding for HTML, and then these are just sort of silly. I just wanted to show again that you could wrap additional rendering inside of these little helper functions, H1 and H2. These don't give you much until you think about maybe other class names you might want to apply or other types of layout techniques, etc. All right, so now that we see especially the breadcrumbs, we can go back up here and look at our page output. And what you'll see, and let me just fold these, is that each of these sections contains an ID, and that's what we're going to link to in our anchor tags, and the page. And again, that's that 100 VH simulation of an isolated page illusion. And if we jump into our pages here, I try to keep this as simple as possible to not overwhelm, but you can see we have our little breadcrumbs interpolation, we have our title interpolation, and then one of the beautiful things about ColdFusion is just that seamless tag-based interplay with the HTML. So we don't have to constantly break out of tag-based into a script-based concept. It's all just tags all the way down where we need it, and then of course the modern script-based syntax where we want it most of the time. And you can see here I have the list of users, and when I link to a user, all I'm doing is linking to that simulation. That pound gives us the single pound in the output, so that goes to the anchor tag user. Here, that anchor corresponds to this ID. And then these pages, there's really not a whole lot going on. You could look at the blog post to see more clearly. Again, just breadcrumbs, titles. I wanted to just give enough output here so that you could see what was going on, but not so much that it was distracting. And again, it's always going to be a trade-off when it comes to a prototype between the ease of creation versus the fidelity. If I'm using the fragment as an example, as a way to jump back and forth between pages, we get really beautiful things like the browser navigation works out of the box. But of course, what it also means is that I can't then hijack the fragment to do other things that I might normally do in a ColdFusion application. So always trade-offs. But again, ColdFusion often gets heralded as a rapid application development platform, and it is 100% exactly that. But it also makes for a wonderful, rapid prototype platform. And I just don't think that gets celebrated enough, and I wanted to put that out there.